So thank y'all for being here. This is our third one this year. And I know we've got some folks online, so thank you. And if you have questions or comments, put them in the chat. We have a special guest here with us today that I'm thrilled to announce. But before I do, stand up if you were in here this morning, setting up the room. I walked in here. There was like, thank you. Don't be shy. Thank you. This is a team effort, so I didn't have to move chairs and tables this morning, and y'all made my day. So I'm going to dive into introducing Carrie. Carrie Kinarn serves as an assistant vice chancellor in the Texas A&M University System Office of Federal Relations. She advocates for the 11 universities and 8 state agencies of the A&M system up in Washington, D.C. Her portfolio includes issues related to national security, homeland security, research security, emergency management, and transportation. She also serves as an adjunct professor at the Texas A&M University School of Law, where she teaches, quote, the Lawyer in Government Seminar, focusing on public policy development. Prior to joining the A&M system in 2019, she served as the staff director for the Committee on Homeland Security's Subcommittee on Emergency Preparedness, Response, and Communications.
It is, rolls right off the tongue.
In the U.S. House of Representatives. She joined the committee in 2005 after having served as counsel to Congressman Peter T. King of New York. Received her bachelor's degree in political science from American University and her JD from the Catholic University School of Law. She's licensed to practice in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And on a personal note, Carrie loves Tinks, right?
I do.
She is a huge advocate in uncovering, flipping over rocks all over in DC in support of initiatives here at Tinks, looking for funding, keeping us on track, and we hugely appreciate her and are thrilled to have her. And I love working with her. So she is a pleasure.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Tracy. Thanks for having me. Tracy mentioned, my name is Carrie Kinirns, and I work in the A&M System DC office. And you're saying to yourself, A&M System has a DC office? We do. We are currently a team of 6, 5 permanent staff, and a really fabulous Aggie intern this semester. His name is Zach. Some may know Dustin Bryant. He previously supported TEACS. He is the head of our office. Cindy is our operations director, and she keeps us all in line. My colleague Valerie represents the system's regional universities. My colleague Jennifer represents AgriLife and all agriculture, including the Forest Service. I'm still a little sore at her for stealing our Al Davis, but we'll let it go. And I represent I don't want to cover my mic. I represent the 3 engineering agencies. I'm sure you know Julie. If you don't, you need to. She's amazing. I am her counterpart for federal issues. Collectively, our team advocates for the entities and system and the programs that are important to them in Washington. So I thought I would talk, as we start out, a little bit about got here, both here as in here in this room, and also here supporting TEACS. The answer to both of those questions involves sort of what I themed the chat, which was the power of saying yes. So for several people in the room know, public speaking is not my thing. I'm an introvert, makes me kind of nervous, but you have to say yes to the things that make you nervous because that's how you grow. So here I am. Because the first thing about when Tracy asked me to do this was public speaking. Don't think I will. And also, actually, really, it was, why would they want to hear from me? But, you know, you stop overthinking. Any overthinkers here? You know, those things where they're trying to figure out that you're not a robot and they do the 9 pictures and where's the crosswalk? And I'm up there at the top of the corner going, is that a crosswalk up there? Should I pick that one? Okay, so you have to stop overthinking and just say yes and do it, because good things happen when you do. And I've found that throughout the course of my career. So how did I get to A&M? I will talk a little bit more about work our office does and what I do to support TEACS and the other engineering agencies a little later, but I figured I'd start out with sort of a little bit my career path. So born on a cold day in January, I won't go back that far. But I am a New Yorker. I'm not an Aggie. They let me come here anyway. I really appreciate it. My parents are up and a nurse. My family has a long history of public service. My dad's a big history buff. You'll see where this is going in a moment. And we took a lot of family trips to Washington, D.C. when I was growing up. You could drive there. A lot of cool things to see, many of them free. So not that I'm part of the D.C. tourism, looking for a vacation, it's a great spot. So we went there a lot when I was little, and I was sort of hooked by it. And so when it came time to apply for colleges, I was all DC all the time. My parents were trying to moderate me a little, maybe pick a school at home just in case you'd like another place. I did apply some other places, mostly applied to school in DC, thankfully got in, and chose to go to American University, as Tracy mentioned, which is in upper Northwest DC, not so far from downtown. And so I was a poli-sci major, and how could I be in DC as a poli-sci major and not intern for my congressman? I didn't really know anything about politics. I'd never worked in an office. I had been a babysitter and a camp counselor, but I figured, why not? I had no idea what I was doing. Showed up in my first day of work in a suit. It sort of felt like I was dressing up in my mom's clothes. Right. But it was great. The congressman was so nice. The staff was so great. I loved the fast-paced nature of the work. I also loved, because I was working for my home congressman, I could make an impact in the area where I was from, even if I wasn't there. And I really became hooked almost immediately. There's a term that they'll call it Potomac fever. For people who really love DC. For people who stay on the Hill a long time, they also call them hill rats. I prefer to be sort of called vermin, so we're going to go with Potomac fever. And I caught it, and a lot of times you'll do one internship and you'll move on to something else. And I decided, no, I really love this office, and I kept going back, and they didn't turn me away, so I kept going back. And they ended up, it was the fall semester of my senior year. I have notes so I don't kind of go on a winding road. So if things go off the tracks, I'll pick them up, but I think we're okay so far. Fall semester of my senior year, they needed a staff assistant, a full-time person in their front office. And they asked me if I wanted it. And I thought, how can I possibly go to school and work at the same time? But I really loved this office and this job. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to say yes. I'm going to do it. I'm going to figure it out, because people work and go to school all the time. It's not like I was plowing some new ground, was for me. And it was amazing, because I got to really engage on a daily basis, learn more about the political process. I was there during when impeachment was a less frequent exercise. I was there during an impeachment. So I got to learn a ton of stuff. But I had also had planned to go to law school when I was an undergrad. And so I worked as a staff assistant while I finished up at school, mostly taking courses at night. I took one class that was called Strategies of Stress Reduction, which coincidentally had nothing to do with reducing stress and made it worse, but I don't recommend that class at American. And so I left and went to law school. And while I was in law school, I actually went back and still interning on the Hill. Because I just loved the policy development. I'm not super political, but I like the politics of policy and why you should do something or not. And so, I was always still one foot on the Hill, but I did work in some law firms over during the summers. And I found that wasn't quite for me. One of the things Tracy mentioned, that I teach a class for the A&M Law School in DC for students who go up to DC on their internship. And I tell them sometimes that when you try something, when you say yes to that thing that you weren't sure if you should say yes to, because you should say yes, but you try it and you figure it's not for you, that can be just as valuable as knowing something that you want to do and get proven right. So I had tried working at some law firms. It wasn't for me. And so similar to what happened to me in undergrad, in my last semester of law school, Mr. King's office needed a legislative assistant so that policy staffer who handles a bunch of issues in the office. And I said yes. And I figured out I finished law school at night, studied for the bar exam while working. That I don't recommend. But it was an opportunity for me to get back on the Hill, because here's the interesting thing about Capitol Hill. They want you to have experience to get the job, but if someone won't take a chance on you to get the job, how do you get the experience, right? And I had worked in his office for many years as an intern, then as a staff assistant, and then I had my law degree. And so, but what someone on paper looking at my resume, like I was a well-educated staff assistant, not that I handle policy effectively for a member of Congress, but my member of Congress that I had worked for, they knew me, they knew I could do it, they hired me back. And it was a really great experience. I got to work on transportation policy, appropriations issues for the member. I handled financial services issues, anything sort of judiciary, anything the Judiciary Committee would handle, law enforcement, courts, intellectual property issues. They put me in charge of taxes. No one ever put me in charge of tax policy. So thankfully I don't do that anymore. Can't really do math that great. But it was a really wonderful experience, a learning experience. So staffers on the Hill, right? You have your personal office staffers, the folks that support the individual member. Then you have your committee staffers. And personal office staffers, we often say this is not a criticism, are an inch deep and a mile wide. There are probably about 3 to 4 policy staffers per members of Congress office. It's a little bit different on the Senate side because their offices are much bigger since they represent an entire state. But staffers, they get to know a little bit about a lot of things. And it doesn't mean that you can't become an expert on a topic in a member's personal office. It's just harder because there's so many things for you to cover. So, I was working there. It was really exciting. I got to work on some pieces of legislation with my boss. But the thing about my old boss, and he's since retired in 2020, was that he was so great and the office was so fun, no one left. So if you were looking for career progression, there was nowhere to go. So at the time, he was on the Financial Services Committee, and when you become a subcommittee chairman on the Financial Services Committee, you get to pick a staffer, your designee, they call them, on the staff. And so I thought, well, I've been handling financial services. I could be his designee on the staff. Mind you, I just told you previously that math is not my jam. But I was going to say yes, because this was an opportunity for me to expand, move to a committee. It would be great. And so while I say that you should say yes, you should also not ignore gut. Because I went through the whole process. I got to almost the final interview. They were about to say, like, yes, you have this job, and someone right. And I went back and I said, I don't think I really want to do this. And they said, okay, fine. We didn't really want you to leave the office anyway. Go sit down. And one of the things my dad likes to say, like one of his favorite quote is, man plans, God laughs. And so, I had this plan. I was going to go to Hill, and I was going to go to a committee, and I was going to work. And financial services did seem like a great path. Man, I can make a lot of money in that, except it wasn't going to make me happy. And it just turns out that while I organized on turning down a job that would have been a great opportunity, that something even better came along, because that opportunity was the thing for me. And what turned out to be the opportunity, and the reason I'm standing here today, was because my boss ended up in September 2005 becoming the chairman of the Homeland Security Committee. I grew up on Long Island, not far outside New York City, daughter of a cop. 9/11. I lived down the street from the Pentagon on 9/11. It had a really big impact on my life, and to be able to work on those issues as a New Yorker, it became really important to me in the time in Mr. King's personal office. And when he became chairman, he asked me if I would move to the committee. And so that in 2005, so we're moving along, right? From the late 70s to 2005, we're I moved down to the committee. And when I did, I was sort of a utility player. I didn't really know what I was doing, right? I wasn't a policy expert. I knew, how things worked a little bit, but I started working on issues related to ports. Sort of was a utility player where I needed an extra body. I would go to help out with an issue. And so I got to work on issues related to visas and travel and port security and grant programs. And so I was able to go on amazing trips, right? I think I was there maybe like 3 months, and there was a trip to Korea, South Korea. I guess, obviously, South Korea. Well, you're laughing, except on that trip to South Korea, I got to go and really, more importantly, come home from North Korea for a day, because it was a period of time when the relationships between North and South Korea were thawing a little bit. And one of the ways that they were sort of helping to grow the relationship was there was an industrial complex just over the demilitarized zone into North Korea. It was called the Kaesong Industrial Complex. It was South Korean businesses, North Korean labor. And they took us across the DMZ for the day to this industrial complex. And it was incredible. There was very well dressed, well spoken, impeccable English speaking young woman who was our tour guide. And she said to me, "Is this your first time in North Korea?" And I looked at her, he's like, She's like, "Really? Never to Pyongyang?" And I was like, "No," right? And then there was this young man on our trip who his family had defected to the Soviet Union. He came to the fall of communism, and I thought, never going home. But thankfully, we did. Someone's calling me. I'm so sorry. We ended up getting to back across into the Republic of Korea. But those were some of the opportunities I had just from saying yes to, would you go to this committee about which you didn't know a lot, and just start working on issues. And you sort of pick things up as you go along. Over time there, I started specializing on emergency preparedness related issues. And in 2011, took over as the staff director of the Emergency Preparedness Subcommittee. And a funny thing about Congress, two funny, one, and this is something that Hank and Jesse saw when they were up in DC a couple weeks ago and commented, "Man, everyone is so young here." Like people in their 20s are running the government. So it was a person in my 20s, well, maybe I was in my 30s, early 30s at that point, running a subcommittee. And you don't become a manager on the Hill because you're good at management. You become a manager on the Hill because you're good at policy. And so I had become familiar with and conversant in the programs and issues of importance to the first responder community, things like the NDPC or the urban search and rescue teams, those programs' importance to TEEX. And by the way, I became so familiar with TEEX because of the work of my predecessor, Dustin, who would come all the time to tell a story. And so anyway, I become a manager because I'm good at policy. And I'm sure, we got it together after a while, but if you had asked my team in the early stages of my time as staff director how things were going, they would probably say, "Carrie's a control freak who lets do nothing because she has to figure it out for herself first before she can let even a little bit go to other people," right? So we got it together. And actually, in 2013, I was invited to come here to visit A&M, to visit TEACS, to go out to Disaster City, to the EOTC. I think I finally convinced my colleagues to take this photo down, but we do in our office what we call Lobby 101 for our Aggie interns who come up to DC for a semester. We always explain to them who we are, what we do, why there is an office in DC. And there's a picture of me standing next to a guy who had worked, Congressman Flores was on the trip, and we were in the EOTC observing training. And finally, it was like a much younger me. And I'm like, you got to take it down. No one's going to believe it. Like, stop using that photo. We can find something more recent. Anyway, and I was able to come here in 2013 and to see what you all do. And, you know, I'll tell you a little bit more about what I do in Washington, but part of it is I had to tell your story. And really, I can tell people what you do, you know, from one end of the week to the next. There's really no substitute for seeing all of the great stuff that you all are doing every day. And so they brought me down here in 2013. And so began my love affair with TEACS and the A&M system and all of the amazing work that's being done here in College Station and across the state. And so fast forwarding a little, because you don't have all day to listen to me. In 2018, we were at an interesting point at the committee. So the way that I worked on the Republican staff, Republicans have term limits for their chairman. So no, you can't be a chairman or a ranking member, so the lead Republican in the minority, right, for more than 6 years. You can't hold that post. And 2018 was also at a time where we knew that control of the House was going to flip. And so we were at this interesting crossroads where Mr. McCall, who's now College Station's representative, who was my chairman, because Mr. King was term limited out and then Mr. McCall came in. Not only was he leaving, but Republicans were going into the minority. And what happens when that happens is the majority controls 2/3 of the staff and the minority controls 1/3. So they had to cut half the staff. And at the same time, a new person who was going to bring in his own leadership was coming in. And so, you know, this all happens in the late fall into the winter type time. And so in the summer, I used to do this thing with my team. We called it Wine Wednesdays. I would bring in wine, they would bring the good ideas. And at the end of a Wednesday, we would just chat and try to generate some ideas for what we could do as activities in the subcommittee. And my colleague said, if you didn't work here, where would you work? And I said, I mean, remember I was a hill rat. I mean, even though I don't want to be called vermin, I was like, yeah, I don't know. I really love this job. I love the work that I do here. I don't know what else I would do. And then I'm not kidding you when I tell you, I said, actually, I think I would really like to work for A&M because I think I would feel great going to work every day, talking about everything that they're doing. And so this was like August 2018, right? And lo and behold, you know, sort of when you put things out there, right? Dustin, my predecessor, happened to call me in the fall and said, hey, for this job to be the head of the University of Alaska Systems Government Affairs Office. They're opening up an office in DC and I'm interviewing to lead it. Would you be a reference? And I said, of course, because he had become a friend of mine. He's an extremely effective advocate, but also just a really great person. I had gotten to know him over the course of like 8 years. And so I said, of course, I'd be a reference to you. Coincidentally, what are they doing with your job? And it wasn't only even for me. I mean, like I said, I would have loved to go work for A&M, but you know, I worked with a bunch of people who half of whom would presumably be out of a job in a couple months. And so he said, oh, you'd be interested, you know, give me your resume. And it ended up turning into a position. And I started in January of 2019. Interestingly, I wasn't retained into the minority. The new Republican who came in, he kept only 5 staff of the original team, and brought on all his own people. I was bummed. And I didn't know if the A&M thing would work out at that point, but, I was really bummed because, at that point I was a lifer, right? I had been at the committee for 13 years, which was not a normal thing on the people jump around every couple of years. And I was there at the committee for 13, for 17. But, life's, like my dad said, man plan, God laughs. And it all turned out even better than I could have imagined, because I did get this opportunity to come here. And I probably, if they had kept me, I would have stayed. With everything that's gone on over the course of the time, I might not be happy. I would, but I had this opportunity to say yes to A&M, and it's been amazing, not just because the work that you all do is great, but the people are fabulous. And I really do feel so good going to work every day and going up on Capitol Hill. I have a job, and I'll say this, where I rarely have to give bad news. Okay, well, that's not entirely true, because I did have to tell poor Lisa that the funding mechanism for the program that we were working on isn't available anymore. But what we do in our office, as I said, is we tell your story. So we go up and we talk about the work that you do and why it's important. We will tell people that this is I always use because that was told to me while I was working on the Homeland Security Committee. If you remember the Boston Marathon bombings in 2013, TEEX had done training up in Boston, was it weeks before, months before, and along with New Mexico Tech. And we had feedback from first responders in Boston that the training they received through the NDPC from TEEX made a difference and helped save lives in how they responded to the attack that day. And what other job do you have where you get to go tell stories like that the work that the people you advocate for is making a huge difference every single day. And so that's what we do. We, as I mentioned, Hank and Jesse were up in DC as part of NDPC meetings a couple of weeks ago, because we're getting ready now for the fiscal year 24 appropriations process. So we go through, we identify all of the programs that are important to our different agencies, and then we help advocate for them through meetings and information submissions. And we get to tell to people about you. Another, like I said, though, the trips down, we bring staff down here to see what you do. And then they go back. And then when we tell them, okay, so we're going to need, XYZ out at Disaster City, that remember that they were out there and they saw what you do. So that's what I do. I'll probably stop here. But I will just, when you are nervous, when you are unqualified, when you think something is unattainable, say yes anyway, because I am proof that saying yes gets you into things more amazing than you could have even sort of envisioned. And things will turn out well. And, that's when you grow. I listen to a lot of podcasts. There's one, and I think she was on Chef, but it's called Appropriately Say Yes. And her tagline is, say yes, adventure fun, then growth. And it's totally true. And you can have some amazing experiences if you will just say yes. But I'm happy to answer questions or however you want to do it.
Can you tell us more about your foster cats, Carrie?
Sure. My spare time, I'm on the executive committee of an animal rescue, and I foster some cats. A current foster right now, his name is Seymour. I think he's close to adoption. He's very sweet. But I love animals, and so that's something I do in my spare time. I did have a litter 2 years ago. Last year, I'm not sure when it was. They were an Aggie litter, the mama, and we named her Reveille. And then we had Chancellor, Hullabaloo, Chancellor, Hullabaloo, Sully, and Sarge. And they all have homes now. Yes, sir.
So can you tell us what a typical day for you is like? And
Yeah.
also a little bit about the office in DC, who else is up there with you guys?
Sure. So typical day. I find that my days are not very typical because I can make a list of things I'm going to do. And then I might get to one of them and something else happens. And so it changes everything, right? So as I mentioned, I represent the engineering agencies. I'm not sure if I also said, I also support Dr. Kevin Gamache in the Research Security Office and TDM. They have Blair Walsh, who many of you may know is awesome, but if she needs any support, I'm there for her as well. And so we will work, just earlier in the week, folks, T's were up in DC doing visits on biomanufacturing and the bioeconomy. If someone is invited to testify, Al's testify before Congress, we will help the person, work on their testimony, prepare them what to expect, that sort of thing. We, right now, as I said, we're doing a lot of appropriation submissions. So we're working with our different entities to determine their priorities, garner support for them. We also just monitor everything that's going on in the Hill. I say everything, as much as we can, what's going on in the Hill agencies, so we can highlight opportunities for the A&M system, whether they're funding opportunities, exposure opportunities, and things like that. We started doing this last year. All of the chief research officers from the system came up to DC, and they had various meetings with agency officials. We talked to them about what we do in the office, how we can provide support. But anytime, you are wanting to have an interaction with a federal official, let us know. We will facilitate that interaction for you. So if you say, or, having, there's like the fire, and I'm missing the right name of it, I apologize. But when you have, folks can come down to the open house at the fire field, we're happy to help, size that and have people from the federal level come to visit. And in terms of what our office looks like, I mentioned a little bit at the beginning. So we're a team of 5, 4 of us are lobbyists, and we divide up the work by agency, but also by issue area. So there is a lot of crosswalk. Interestingly for me, right? Every time I've left one office to go to the other, it's sort of like when you were in kindergarten, will there be someone to eat lunch with me? Right? We're really close knit. And in many ways, I feel like our office is very similar to a member of Congress person's office, right? I'm not sure who the member is. I guess it's the chancellor is our member. I should say that. The chancellor is our member. And we all support the chancellor. And we work really collaboratively because just because something's happening at a regional university, it doesn't mean I wouldn't work on it, because my colleague Valerie might not, have worked in a Homeland Security issue area, and I can help. Vice versa, right? If one of my entities has a question about a Department of Education program, I don't work in those programs. I never have it. I'm not as familiar with them, but she's an expert, and we can really cross-pollinate that expertise.
Can you share about a time you said yes to something and then regretted it? And how you handled it?
I regretted how I handled it.
You said yes to it? Or
Yeah.
you didn't wear a flag?
I mean, I would say that the job I almost took, right? I said yes, and then you have to say yes, but you also have to trust your gut. And I don't know that anything that I've said yes to has ever really turned out badly, lucky in that regard. I mean, maybe we won't name names, but I worked at a law firm over a summer and it was dreadful. But it was a really good learning experience, and the people were wonderful. It just wasn't for me, right?
We have a few questions in the.
Okay.
Can Can you name your podcast again?
Oh, I think it's Say Yes, but I will double check. Yeah, Carla Hall is the name of the chef, and she hasn't put any new ones up recently. But she's from DC and she's awesome.
And should you say yes when your plate is already full?
Well, yeah. I mean, have you heard though, if you want something done, give it to a busy person, because you figure out how to get it done and you make time for the things that are important. That being said, you certainly shouldn't, you don't want to stress yourself out or string yourself out so much where you're not being successful at things, right? I think there's a balance, but it could be good.
After to the position you accepted, did you experience any degree of imposter syndrome? If so, how did you deal with that?
Every day, every day. In fact, like coming up here today, who wants to hear from me? What do I even have to share? And I think it's just something that you have to push past. Like I said, I listen to podcasts. I was listening to one about courage or confidence, excuse me. And she said, confidence isn't a feeling. It's you have confidence after you do something. And so you're never going to get good at something if you don't try. It's sort of like riding a bike. You have to keep getting out there before you'll really get up and going on that bike. And so I think you have to push past it. And also, like that voice in your head, ignore her. She's the worst. Yeah.
Carrie, I think something that may be instructive to especially for young women and all women in this room are young.
Well done.
Got it. But my relationship was big.
That's right. I can see why.
That's not very well read, okay? But what I've noticed about you over the years, when we work with the National Domestic Preparedness Consortium, that you have a quality of obviously rising in a world that's dominated by men and walking into a consortium meeting. Well, these guys sitting around thinking they know the experts, and you just kind of had a way of just standing your ground. Is okay, I understand, but this is what we're going to do. And I think that's important because, again, and I'm sincerely, most of what we do in emergency response is dominated by men. Okay, and I have noticed where I was, where I am now, that the young ladies have sort of a hesitancy, with the exception of Lauren Murphy, to kind of say, hey, you need to listen to me. I know what I'm talking about. What's your advice to them in those types of situations?
Yeah, it's interesting. I'll say the reason why, and I've had a lot of experiences where I'm the only woman in the room. I think the reason why I haven't let it faze me, I attribute that to my mom. From the time I was little, it was, you can be anything, you can do anything. If you want to be president, you can be president. And so I was fortunate to have had that upbringing. I'm also kind of a pushy New Yorker. But more than anything, I am a good actor. And more often than not, I am freaking out. But as a friend and former colleague to me is, you have to be a duck. On the surface, you are gliding, you're ducking it, you are amazing. And under the water, you are paddling like hell, right? And I would say that that is something that still happens. Like I walk into a room and I'm like, today. But also, I was able to become confident in the information, right? I studied really hard. I don't mean in school, right? The issues that I was covering, my team, and it wasn't just me, we were an awesome team of 4 or 5 people, depending on the, coincidentally, mostly women. I think most of the time, not purposefully, the team was 3/4 women. And it was an unusual thing when you would walk in. Actually, we just did it the other day. We walked into the House Homeland Security Committee where I used to work to meet with, they changed the subcommittee names changed like every Congress. I think it's the Emergency Management and Technology Committee, which is an easier name to say than Emergency Response and Communications. But it was again a table of all women meeting with us. I think you just have to be confident in the information that you have gathered and studied and do the best to stand your ground. And it's not easy. I think it comes with practice, right? That confidence comes with experience. It's not a feeling. And I think that that's sort of what it came to, but mostly my mom.
I was gonna ask, what's like the craziest thing you've ever experienced at Capitol?
Crazy. Oh, okay. I think this is far enough ago that no one will get in trouble, and I won't use names. So in 2006, we were negotiating what was called Safe Port Act. It was port security legislation. And what you may not know about the Committee on Homeland Security, the Department. So DHS was created by cobbling together 22 different agencies. It was the largest government reorganization since the creation of DoD. And when that happened, they created the Committee on Homeland Security in Congress. It was a select committee at first, meaning temporary. It wasn't a standing committee, those are the committees that when a new Congress starts, a select committee at the end of a Congress, if it's renewed, goes away. So it was a select committee. And what they had done was they tasked that committee of looking at the jurisdiction, the who does what in the House, and coming up with the jurisdiction for the committee that would oversee the Department of Homeland Security. Well, what did they do? They put the chairman and the ranking members of all the committees that had a jurisdictional interest in the legacy agency that went to DHS onto the committee, and no one wanted to give up their stuff. So over the course of time, and it's still true today, actually the only unfulfilled recommendation of the 9/11 Commission is Congress to fix the jurisdiction of over the Department of Homeland Security. So you have at any given time like 90 committees and subcommittees in Congress with jurisdiction over DHS. So anyway, back to the Safe Port Act. We're in what's called conference. So the House has passed a bill, the Senate's passed their version, and the conference committee is when you come together to resolve the differences to come up with that one product that the president's going to sign. We're close, it's kind of like weeks. And you have is the conference like papers. And the conferees, the different members from the different committees who are a part of this conference committee have to sign the paperwork. And there was one committee that had a far lesser role to play. They are a big time committee and they will let you know it. And so their guy thought that they were going to control the conference paperwork. And this guy that I used to work with, who is sort of acerbic, even when he's in the best mood ever, goes to start having a pulling match of papers with this guy and then does this. Thankfully, the guy went, dropped papers and our guy got the papers. And so the Committee on Homeland Security held the papers. But I have been the witness to more almost fist fights than I should comment on. That one was probably the craziest. I think you had a question. I'm sorry.
You said something in the beginning about how you like our policy.
Uh-huh.
I find it amazing that somebody can get so interested in politics because there's so much of it around.
Sure.
And then you talk about you were information gatherer.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we had to do something. Did you research it yourself, or how did you get the information that we needed in the past?
Yeah, so it's a great question in a number of different ways. First, the Congressional Research Service, it's part of the Library of Congress. They are the research arm of Congress, and there are experts on a wealth of information. And Congress, and now the public actually has access to their work. And so, sometimes it's an issue that they'll just put reports out on. But as congressional staff, you have an ability to call over to the expert in XYZ issue and say, hey, I really need to know more about this topic. Would you look into it for me? There's that, but then we also do our own research. Congressional hearings are an excellent way to information on a topic. We would bring in, various stakeholders on an issue and get their perspective on the given topic. We'd also do a lot of stakeholder meetings, so more unofficial, right? Just regular meetings, briefings by the agency, and that all of that information that we would gather would inform legislation, other, policy proposals that would come out of the committee. But it's a lot of information gathering. Yeah.
You said that when you started managing that you were a control freak.
Uh-huh.
You wanted to understand the information before you could.
Yeah.
Delegate. How did you work through that? What led you to?
Yeah, that's a great question. It was a tough one for me because even though I had been working a little bit in this area, it was a lot of the issues in the subcommittee were new to me. And I, if I didn't do the work, how would I know the issue? And the answer, it sort of came down to, it wasn't fair to my team because they weren't learning and growing and doing. And I started talking, I found some mentors. I think mentorship is really important if you can find someone and learn from their experiences and get some advice from them. So I did a little bit of that. I mean, that's one thing I would recommend if the Hill were taking my recommendations, that, having workforce development, personal development training for the staff would be a really good idea because, I know I'm not the only one who is in that position. And it was, a lot of conversations with the team. What do you need to be successful as my teammate? How can I support you? And a lot of it was learning to delegate, which I'm still not great at, but I'm working on it. And we really did. I had the real benefit of we had a pretty constant team, and so we just worked on it together. And I think a lot of it too comes down to trust. And as we started to trust each other, and they showed me their work, how good it was, and we worked as a team to make it happen. So it wasn't all me, but I learned so much from them, which was great.
Any other questions?
Great. So, I kind of like to do a little wrap up overview, and by the way, you're very interesting to me. I've always been kind of fascinated by politics or the political process. I remember watching Mr. Smith Goes to Washington and being very impacted by that. So I'm not going to tell you which version because I'm not going to date myself.
Right.
So. But first of all, thank you all for all that you do on our behalf. It's very much appreciated. So I got out of your lesson today. Good things happen when you step out of your comfort zone. Also, figuring out what doesn't work for you can sometimes be as valuable as what does. That very much. And trust your gut. I really appreciated that too. But also, thank you for sharing the story about the Boston bombing. I thought it was really impactful too. It's nice to know what we do here is such an impact, and that's why it's such a great place to work.
That story has stayed with me for 10 years. So
Thank you.
thank you. Thanks for having me, everyone.